Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, Zombies Edition. And today, we're going to be discussing Episode 2 of Marvel Zombies. So, previously in Marvel Zombies. So, in this zombified variant of the MCU, we actually wound up meeting 3 survivors who have been living in this zombie apocalypse, specifically Kamala Khan, Riri Williams, and Kate Bishop, accompanied by Tony's onboard AI Friday, who is now controlling the Iron Man armor since, well, zombie Tony got his head blown off. Well, they were basically what they've been doing is that they've been living out of a manor that Kate's family owned in New York, and they only leave the manor if they ever needed to get supplies or food or whatever. However, during one of these supply runs, a shield Quinjet wound up crashing in the middle of Times Square, and in the chest cavity of the pilot was what they learned was a communications device which is supposed to send out ultrasonic telecommunications into space. However, the group did not have the necessary facilities or faculties in order to figure out more specific details about what this thing was supposed to be sending a signal out to, and the only way they could do that was to bring the device to a shield base, and the closest one was unfortunately in Ohio, meaning the girls would have to venture out into the zombie wasteland. Something that did cause kind of a debate in the group, but eventually they decided to risk it as they basically went out into what was left of the United States to try and find the shield base. Unfortunately, things went foobar very quickly as they went through an area of the states that had come to be called the Valley of the Fallen Gods, and it was called that because in this valley 2 immortal forces were duking it out, neither being able to defeat the other, which in this case was Icarus of the Eternals and a zombie Captain Marvel. And unfortunately, the girls got caught in the crossfire of their battle, and the end result was that Kate Bishop and Riri Williams wound up biting the dust, leaving Kamala behind. And yeah, Friday wound up going out too because she wouldn't abandon Riri. Thankfully, help arrived in the form of this reality's variant of Blade, who, after the death of Mark Spector, became this world's Moon Knight, and he's here to help Kamala on her mission, and so he brings her to the SHIELD base, which it turns out has been commandeered by the Red Guardian, Yelena, and Melina. And Melina is able to look at the device and is able to figure out that it's trying to beam a signal into space to contact the Nova Corps. Unfortunately, there's an electrical shield surrounding Earth that prevents any electronic signals from entering or leaving Earth. So if they want to get the signal to the Nova Corps, then it needs to get into space. As such, the group realizes they need to get a rocket before they can get their hands on one. Unfortunately, the base is set upon by an army of zombies led by a zombie Okoye, who is acting on behalf of this world's variant of the Scarlet Witch, who has come to be called the Queen of the Dead. As such, our heroes basically had to make a getaway to try and keep this device from getting into the Scarlet Witch's hands, but unfortunately, another one of their numbers bite the bullet, as Melina ends up getting a spear through her chest for her troubles. Thankfully, the rest of the heroes managed to get out okay, and last episode ended with Blade stating that he may know someone who has a rocket, and thus that's where this episode begins. Sort of. Actually, in reality, this episode actually opens up with us meeting other survivors of the zombie apocalypse, specifically Shang-Chi, as it turns out that on the day that when the zombie plague hit, Shang and his friend Katie were unfortunately there in the running crowds as zombies began attacking everyone. And while Shang and Katie did their best to try and get away from all the carnage, well, it's a zombie plague. People are going to be panicking, and zombies are going to be looking for flesh. So unfortunately, it was a losing battle. While Shang did have to break out some more of his kung fu, since at this point, secret identity is kind of bullshit when the world's going to hell. Well, things just weren't going well for anybody, as Katie wanted to go see her family, but unfortunately the part of town where her family lived was up in flames, and she was told that there were no survivors. Thankfully, though, help arrived in the form of Shang-Chi's father, who basically arrived with several helicopters from the Ten Rings, and he was here to basically rescue Shang, but Shang was not going to abandon his friends, and so, unfortunately, Shang wanted to keep fighting, which resulted in Shang getting bitten. He was bitten on his hand. But, well, as you do with zombie plagues, one bite is all it takes, and so Shang's dad saw what had happened to him, and, well, he decided to sacrifice himself in his son's stead, as he threw his son the Ten Rings, like in the main continuity, or in the main MCU continuity, and, well, the Ten Rings were able to stop the plague from spreading beyond his arm, but in the process, Shang's dad wound up dying too. As such, Shang, what was left of the Ten Rings, basically got into a helicopter, taking Katie, and by extension, that FBI agent who I genuinely do not remember his name. He was an Ant-Man the Wasp. I'm sure that there is someone out there who will tell me his name, but I genuinely cannot remember it. I know who he is, but I don't remember. It's the FBI agent from Ant-Man and the Wasp, the guy who wanted to learn close-up magic. He's in this movie. He's running along. He's basically helping out Shung. He's basically now tagging along with Shung and Co. But in the meantime, while the group does manage to get away from New York, it's basically made clear that there are not going to be any safe havens anywhere. And so when the question is raised what the group is going to do now, Shung just says they're going to survive. And from there, we fast forward 5 years, and it's here we actually get a time frame for how long the world has been kind of overrun by zombies. It's been a 5-year time gap, much like with Endgame. I like those parallels. But basically in that 5-year gap, Shung and his group have basically made a name for themselves in what's left of America as these wandering heroes, helping out the downtrodden, defending those who can't defend themselves. Basically, just being your average everyday heroes. And on top of that, we see that Shung while still wielding at least one of the 10 rings, has actually shared them with the rest of the group. So all of them in one way or another have access to the 10 rings. But basically what's going on here is that we're not seeing them be heroes of the downtrodden right now. In reality, they're basically traveling across the vast wasteland with a truck full of cows. Why? Well, you see in New Orleans there is tell of a city on the water, and Shung and Co want to go there because, well, I'm assuming they just kind of need a place where they can set up residency, just a place where they can kick their feet up, relax, and not have to worry about being hounded by zombies for I don't know how long. As such, the group manages to arrive in New Orleans, though they do fight off some Skrulls to protect their cows. And upon arriving, they end up encountering a bit of turbulence, so to speak. I say turbulence even though they're not in the air, but basically, Shung accidentally bumps into the Red Guardian because it turns out that him, Kamala, Yelena, and Blade are all here because they also want to get onto the ship, the city on the sea, because, well, they need a ride to where that rocket is, which in this case is in a place called New Asgard. I'm assuming it's kind of similar to the New Asgard that's in the Prime MCU timeline, but well, it's a zombie universe, and the internet has given me a few bits of spoilers, even though I don't want it to, so I'm assuming that it's a very different place than what we're familiar with. Regardless, though, that's where our rocket ship is, so that's where our heroes are going. As such, when the Red Guardian sees that Shung's hand is zombified, he freaks out, which does cause a little panic right there in the dock, but the panic is tied down as the Baron of the city on the water makes himself known, and it's Zemo. Baron Zemo. And he is still very much the same jackass that we know him in the Prime MCU timeline, because he acts all affable and kind and polite, but he recognizes that that our two groups are made up of heroes, and he still is not a big fan of superheroes. As such, he makes his hostility abundantly clear, but Shung basically vouches his and his friend's case because, well, they brought cows, they just seek refuge, they don't mean any harm. And so Zemo reluctantly does allow them to be on a ship under the pretense that they don't do anything to disturb his peace, so to speak. As such, Shung and his friends concede, with Kamala and Co conceding as well, and thus everyone boards the city on the sea, which it turns out is the Triskelion. I kind of like that. It's a nice world building. But regardless, we see that Zemo has basically taken control of Triskelion, and the Triskelion basically is just chock full of people. All of them just living their lives, all from different walks of life, and on the surface, it doesn't look like that Zemo is pulling anything. As this place is genuine, it gives everyone as much food as they want. Everyone seems to be living calmly and peacefully, and there are even times when Zemo comes out and just addresses the crowd, and well, he basically just urges them to remember those that have fallen, because, well, in a zombie world, those that we love are going to end up facing the consequences, and he basically just lets everyone know to hold them close, that they may be gone, but they are always with us, which, it's nice. I like that. Either way, during lunch, Shung's group and Kamala's group end up kind of exchanging notes, and thus Shung's group learns what Kamala's group is doing, that they're heading to New Asgard and all that. And as such, when everyone disperses and goes back to their rooms, well, Shung doesn't really believe it completely. Because despite the fact that he and his crew are wielding magical armbands that give them superpowers, he doesn't buy the fact that the half-vampire, the guy in the red spandex, and the girl who can create light from her hands are off to go see New Asgard. He thinks it's kind of stupid. But Katie does tell Shung that she thinks that their mission might be a little bit worth it because, they're trying to save the world here, and yeah, it may be a hopeless endeavor, But in a world where hope tends to be scarce, a little bit here and there goes a long way. However, as everyone is settling down for the night, we see that the Triskelion is being attacked, specifically by hordes of zombies from. Hold on one second. Sorry, I was blanking on the name of the city. It's been a while since I've seen Wakanda Forever. But yeah, we see that the denizens of Talokan have also been turned into zombies, and they're attacking the Triskelion. However, when Zemo is told by the crew that the zombies are attacking the Triskelion, he genuinely doesn't care. The walls have been made to stand up to harder stuff, so he doesn't think anyone's getting in. But when asked, well, what happens if their boss shows up? Zemo responds, well, that's why we have heroes, don't we? Well, unfortunately, their boss does show up, as it turns out that somehow, in some way, Namor was infected by the zombie virus, as we see him just kind of resting at the bottom of the sea, and that rest is disturbed as at the edge of the ocean we see the zombie Okoye and her army. And Okoye basically through Okoye, the Scarlet Witch ends up communicating with Namor and basically brings him into the fold, so to speak, as we see Namor's eyes open and they're glowing red. So yeah, clearly the Scarlet Witch is now driving his ship, so to speak. As such, Namor ends up leading an attack right on the Triskelion, and well, that's when Zemo basically shows his hand. As it turns out, there is a catch to this place. And, well, for the most part, this place is exactly what you see on the tin. It's all peaceful and nice, and he welcomes everyone. Well, whenever the Triskelion passes through these parts of these parts of the oceans, there is always a chance that Namor will attack. And Zemo knows that when zombies go attack, they typically want flesh. So sometimes it's best to part with a finger rather than give up the hand. Yeah, it turns out that Zemo has been sacrificing heroes, so to speak. Now, whether he's been actually sacrificing any other superheroes that have taken up refuge on the Triskelion, or he's occasionally had to sacrifice the occasional civilian, I do not know. But the point is, whenever the Triskelion goes by Namor's territory, people are sacrificed to appease the whole, in order to save the whole. So, yeah, he's planning to sacrifice all our heroes. As the cells that Shang-Chi, Kamala, and both of their groups are basically walled off, and Zemo basically tells the assorted people in the Triskelion, we're being attacked, but don't worry, our heroes will sacrifice themselves, and blah, blah, blah. Basically, he just ejects their cells right there out into the water. So, yeah, they're kind of fucked. Well, okay, actually scratch that. It's looking more like only Kamala's cell got ejected. Well, so it looks like it does look like that Shang-Chi's cell is next on the chopping block, but it doesn't get sent out first. However, as their cell gets ejected out, thankfully Kamala was able to throw up a light shield around herself and her friends so they didn't drown. But unfortunately, that doesn't really do much when Namor comes flying right at them and tries pile driving them right into the Triskelion. And as such, while Shang and his crew try breaking out of their cell, and Zemo is fully prepared to send them out next, well, it turns out the tide managed to carry Kamala and co. back to the Triskelion. And just as Zemo says that they're all perfectly safe, Namor ends up barreling their ball right into the Triskelion, causing water to come flooding in. And Zemo was able to cut it off. Unfortunately, well, Zombie Namor is now right there in the middle. And, he does have countermeasures in place. He activates a cell in the center of the Triskelion, which is supposed to be able to hold incredibly powerful beings. Well, the hole in the hull does start letting more zombies in as they begin attacking the place. And while guards do open fire on them, well, all it takes is one bite, and the place is still filling up with water. So, basically, Zemo realizes it's every man for himself, as he tells everyone they need to get to the escape pods and make a run for it. Though, as he makes an escape, he fully intends on abandoning the heroes, because he basically blames them for this, since if they had just sacrificed themselves like he wanted them to, then none of this would have happened, and blah-bitty-blah-bitty-blah. As such, Zemo and his cohorts make a run for it, even trying to seal the doors, but the heroes do their best to try and break through and follow him. Unfortunately, though, the place is still filling up with water, and, well, and zombie Namor is a very resilient fucker. And so while Zemo and his, I guess, right-hand man do manage to make it to where one last pod is, unfortunately, Zemo starts having problems as when he tries getting the pod ready, they end up there's a malfunction and the pod won't launch. And meanwhile, back with our heroes as they're trying to make their way to where Zemo is holed up, they find that the door is locked, and unfortunately, following after them is the zombie Namor. And while Kamala is able to put up a force field to keep him getting to them, well, it's zombie Namor. He's still incredibly powerful, even if he's the part of the undead. And while Shang is able to brace the group from being crushed by the door with the 10 rings, unfortunately, that's still not doing much because Namor is still pushing harder and harder. So they're really not doing well. Eventually, the pressure of both the 10 rings and Namor does manage to break the door down. But, well, Namor is still just going nuts as he just starts going after anybody, which results in sadly, a couple of expendables on Shang-Chi's part end up being killed. And I am going to call them expendables because they literally were just people that were part of the group, and they did not even have any names. Or if they did have names, I don't remember them. Much like the FBI guy. Again, I'm sorry I don't remember his name. I know he has one. He's appeared in multiple MCU projects. It bugs me that I don't remember his name. But again, as Namor is basically just slaughtering everybody, Yelena goes up to Zemo and asks where the pod is, and Zemo lets her know about it, but he says that it's not launching, that the only way to launch it is to get to manual controls. And as Yelena basically ends up going down this shaft to where the manual controls are, and just makes a run for it. But in the meantime, Namor is just going apeshit, and he nearly ends up killing the Red Guardian. But the thing is, Kamala ends up seeing the red in his eyes, and so she manages to bait him as she grabs the transmitter and basically says, "Hey, you want this? Come get it!" And so Namor just drops the Red Guardian before he can kill him, and as such, he tries coming at Kamala, who instead clenches the transmitter in her hand before covering her hand in a light construct, which she immediately punches right into Namor's face, which would not by itself be enough to stop him, but that's when Shang uses the 10 rings to hold Namor back, and basically, as Kamala keeps pushing, Namor keeps pulling, and Shang keeps holding, Kamala ends up using more of her light powers to transform her fist into a giant spike ball that's right there in Namor's mouth. The end result, his head fucking explodes. This show really does like its TVMA rating, doesn't it? But, yeah, zombie Namor is dead. And thankfully, Yelena does do the job that she set out to do as the controls as the pod doors end up opening and everybody gets inside. Also, Zemo's right-hand man also got killed, like I said, the expendable. However, as everyone piles into the pod, Alexei asks where the heck Yelena is, but once the doors close behind him, Yelena ends up talking to them over the speakers and basically lets everybody know she ain't gonna be following them. Right now, the only thing that's keeping her from being eaten alive is a steel door that's holding out several zombies from getting to where the manual controls are. But that door is not going to hold. She knows she can't follow them. As such, Alexei is just banging on the pod doors, just demanding that Yelena come with them. That she should be there with them. But Yelena basically just tells her dad that she isn't going anywhere. This is a good time to die, and that she loves her father, and that he needs to remember her with every breath he takes. And yeah, Alexei is just downtrodden, screaming, begging his adoptive daughter to come with them. But eventually Yelena causes the pod to get jettisoned from the Triskelion. And thus, well, we don't see what happens to Yelena, but with the zombies clawing at the window and nearly cracking it, it is made abundantly clear that Yelena is not going to be walking away either. And thus, the episode ends with Zemo asking the group where they're going to go, and Shang letting him know that they're going to New Asgard. So, yeah, that's where the episode ends. So, my thoughts on this episode. Once again, it's a big WTF episode, but with this one, in my opinion, I feel it has much greater character stakes, or at the very least, it actually does well at it kind of introducing the characters they set up. Like I said last week, one of the problems that I had with the first episode of Marvel Zombies was that it didn't really do much to introduce these variants of the characters. While we were aware enough of who these characters were from the proper MCU timeline, so that we had an idea of who they were, again, part of the problem with that first episode was that we didn't really get the chance to see them transition from that version of events to this version of events. Because after all, just by virtue of them living in this zombie apocalypse for 5 years means that these characters are not the same characters that we are familiar with from the Prime MCU timeline. So there are going to be some major differences. And the thing is, I kind of just like having the introduction to help set us on the path for why these characters are the way they are. And this episode thankfully gives us that with Shang and Co. As we see Shang-Chi and Katie as we see them in their regular setting just as the zombie plague hits. And I love seeing that. Like with Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings when things started going crazy in that movie, this is a great transition as we see Shang and Katie basically in a full panic mode as they see everything going to hell. Shang having to basically abandon his secret identity to try and defend Katie and all these other innocent civilians. And then likewise, we immediately get a sense of what their situation is when we see Shang's father give him the Ten Rings to halt his infection and then sacrifice himself, with Shang and Katie running off with what's left of his forces and basically realizing that they're going to need to find ways to survive in this new world, because this world is basically fucked now. And I like seeing that transition because it immediately acts as a bridge between who they were and who they are. Like I said, there's still enough of who they are in there that you can recognize them, but this episode does a really good job at showcasing why Shang-Chi and all of his friends are the way they are. That they're not just random people that live in this world. They are new people who live here. They are new people who have that have new lives and have to basically adapt and have had to adapt or die in order to survive. And I like seeing that. And I like that we still see, I like seeing the camaraderie with them. Like I said, the FBI, like there's this running gag throughout the episode where the FBI agent I mentioned is quote unquote friends with one of the I guess ninjas, I suppose. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm probably using the wrong word. He's probably not a ninja, but basically one of the warriors from the Ten Rings. And the warrior doesn't speak ever. He's constantly wearing a mask, and the only thing you see are his eyes. But he basically is super deadly and basically does whatever he wants. And basically this FBI agent has a pseudo friendship with him where he jokes around with him, pretends he has responses, and clearly the ninja does not have much of a problem with it, otherwise he would have killed the guy by now. But I kind of like seeing that. I like the one-sided camaraderie that basically they have something akin to a pseudo friendship, even if it's just coming from one of the parties. And the other party, while maybe not fully for it, is not fully against it either. So it's kind of fun just kind of seeing one work off of the other, and I think that's kind of fun. On top of that, I do like seeing more of Shang in this new world, as again, there is still enough of the original Shang-Chi in there in order for him to be recognizable. Not just the fact that he knows Kung Fu or has access to the Ten Rings, but by virtue of the fact that we just see him being a decent guy. Even in the zombie apocalypse, while he does typically have a survivalist mentality, i.e. do whatever you can to survive, the fact that he and his crew have built up a reputation as heroes does showcase that even though they're doing whatever they can to just stay afloat, their good nature has not gone to the wayside, which I like that. It's all, like I said, kind of like what I mentioned back during the plot summary. Sometimes a little hope in a hopeless situation can go a long way. If you want to give an example of that, in the show Power Rangers RPM, the first episode is very much a tone setter for the series, and it feels very un-Power Rangers like. But then the instant you see the guys in the multicolored spandex show up, suddenly we get a nice little tone shift because we suddenly get a sense of hope in an otherwise hopeless scenario. And that's kind of what we have here with Shang and Co. They're in the midst of a zombie apocalypse with the world basically being held together by a bunch of string and hope, but it's still something. It's still something, and I like that. And it shows that they do still have camaraderie. They joke with each other, they have fun with each other, and quite frankly, I like seeing that. When you have such a dismal and grim situation like one set in a Marvel Zombies universe, you do need some levity here and there, and you usually can find it with those you trust most. And I kind of like seeing that with Shang and Co., so I dig that. It's nice. On top of that, I do like seeing more of the world building here. like I said with last week, I like just seeing more of how the zombie plague has affected the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I like that one of those changes is that we've seen Zemo basically rise to power. Because at the time when the zombie plague broke out, he was most likely being held in the Triskelion. After all, odds are the events of Captain America Civil War still happen in this timeline, so of course the Triskelion is where Zemo would most likely be held at that time. So when everything went to hell on the mainland, it makes perfect sense that he would take over. Because, yeah, for those who haven't seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Zemo is an actual Baron. So he does have political experience. So I like the idea of him just seeing this world going to hell and basically looking to whoever was on the Triskelion and saying, we can work through this, and thus basically acting as something akin to a beacon of hope here. Yeah, he's still a jackass at the end of the day, but even the MCU Baron Zemo did have his nobler qualities, because as he basically just did not like the idea of power unchecked, and he did like the idea of helping the little guy. So it makes sense that he would set up the society, which would still have its skewed rules, but at the very least would have some genuine humanity in there. And I like that he wasn't faking that. Yeah, he still was hiding something because he was fully intending to sacrifice. Sorry, food digesting. He was fully planning to sacrifice the heroes to the zombie Namor in order to save the Triskelion. But the thing is, the fact that he basically just held the fact that he just had this big meeting with everybody in the Triskelion and pretty much just had it be a memorial saying remember those you've lost, they're always with us. It's a nice little human moment, and it's something that I think anyone can relate to, because again, when you have a situation as dire as this, you do need those moments of humanity to remember that there were people lost, and that as long as we live, we honor their memories. And that's a nice thing. That's something I genuinely like seeing. Again, that doesn't undermine what Zemo does when he does reveal his hand and show his shiftier side, but still, it's a nice moment, and I'll give you that. The second half of this episode does still once again up the ante on the WTF factor as we see more of who else is infected with the zombie virus. And Zombie Namor ain't no one's fool. This guy is fucking terrifying. Now, we know that Namor's already a relentless fucker. When you go back and watch Black Panther Wakanda Forever, that guy basically brought the hammer down if he wanted you dead. He went after Wakanda when the Americans started drilling into his technology, when the Americans started drilling into his tech, and he blamed them because it was Wakanda revealing itself to the world that made people want to look for vibranium. And then likewise, when things didn't go his way, he could be polite. He basically was untouched. He basically would not stop until you physically stopped him yourself. This guy was basically a machine. And so to see that same determination and ferocity translated into a zombie is even more terrifying. Because Namor, when Namor was exposed to water, he's almost unstoppable. Even in Wakanda Forever, the dude was almost unbeatable. The only reason that Shuri managed to get a win on him in the movies was because she had to dry him out. But here, Zombie Namor is in his element. He is surrounded by water, so here he's faster, he's stronger, he barely breaks a sweat if he had sweat to break. He basically is almost unstoppable, and the only reason that the heroes end up beating him is because they bait him, since he's in the thrall of the zombie Scarlet Witch, he's after that transmitter, and so all it took was Kamala luring him right to her fist, and then boom, head go boom. I like that. So I do genuinely like that. And again, he looks fucking creepy. There are several times when he obviously looks vicious and freaky, and the thing is, Namor in the main MCU definitely had his more animalistic tendencies, so to speak. Not really animalistic tendencies. I guess the most animalistic thing about him was the wings on his ankles. This one. He doesn't even look human. The other Namor at least looked human. Aside from maybe pointy ears. This Namor has sharp teeth and make him look like a shark. And again, going back to the ferocity, he has that with him in spades. So seeing him just wreck everyone's shit is already terrifying. And once again, to have the episode end with one of the groups sacrificing themselves so that the whole can survive is genuinely sad. Seeing Alexei beg and plead with Yelena to come with them, while she's basically telling the group, keep going, never stop fighting, is sad and tragic, and it's very human. And the last one we see with Yelena is just her sitting in the manual control room and just pouring herself one last drink. It's, again, heartbreaking and sad, and it ends the episode on a rather melancholic note. So I genuinely dig that. It's very good and very much has a good and very much helps very much convey the tone of just how dark and dismal everything is, and just how much the heroes are losing just by trying to find ways to fix their world. It's sad, but it's sad, and even by the end, when the heroes still have renewed determination to continue their journey, there's just a sense that something about this is broken. That yeah, they can keep fighting, but little by little, the reasons for why they're fighting are falling by the wayside, and it's sad. It's genuinely sad. So I dig that. I like that. It definitely carries with it everything you need. So I can't really think of much else to say about this. I think I had something else. Give me 1 second, actually. Yeah, I can't really think of much else to say, honestly. I thought I did, but I don't. I guess I could say I liked the column and seeing the Triskelion operating the way it was. So there's that. But otherwise, I think the episode is still a pretty damn good one. I like that we actually get the introduction of this world's variants of Shang-Chi and what's left of the Ten Rings, plus of course Katie and the FBI guy. Again, sorry, I don't remember his name. But so I like that. I like seeing more world building as we're seeing more of how the world how the world and some of its denizens have adapted to now living in this zombie world. So again, like that. The second half of the episode is is very intense as we see Namor unleash the attack, and likewise seeing the two groups come together and yet still face their share of losses is genuinely tragic, but still basically carries with it a determination, as we know the heroes have to keep going, even though, like I said, their reasons for why they keep going are starting to dwindle one by one. So, on the whole, I think it's still a pretty damn good episode, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. And well, I'd be kind of missed to say I'm also looking forward to seeing who else is gonna bite the bullet, because it's gonna hurt, and I know it's gonna hurt. So, but yeah, either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next week. Take care.